My beloved child. Before your next thought carries you somewhere else, pause for just a heartbeat. There are moments that arrive so quietly they almost go unnoticed, yet they carry the weight of an entire season of your life. This is one of those moments. Not because the heavens suddenly changed, but because your heart has been traveling toward this intersection far longer than you realize. If these words have reached you today, allow yourself to listen as though you are watching the opening scene of a great story. This is fictional inspirational storytelling, yet perhaps its emotions will remind you of your own journey. There is something about you that cannot be measured with ordinary eyes. Most people notice appearances first. They notice voices, smiles, achievements, or the things the world applauds. But there is another kind of beauty that moves silently beneath the surface, hidden where only the deepest parts of a soul can recognize it. That unseen beauty is where this story begins. Imagine the first light of dawn stretching across distant hills. The earth has not fully awakened. The air is still cool. Birds have only begun their morning songs. Somewhere in that quiet, another heart unexpectedly catches a glimpse of something they were never prepared to see. Not perfection. Not fame. Not wealth. But a light. A light they cannot explain. And in that instant, everything inside them begins to change. Have you ever wondered why certain people cross your path and suddenly become restless without understanding why? Why conversations linger in their minds long after they end? Why they find themselves remembering tiny details that everyone else forgets? Perhaps the answer has less to do with what you said, and more to do with what they felt standing near the person you are becoming. There are seasons when life convinces you that nothing is happening. The prayers seem unanswered. Doors remain closed. Days blend together until hope begins whispering instead of singing. You wonder whether anyone truly notices your quiet endurance. Yet Scripture often reminds us that the greatest works begin long before they become visible. Seeds grow in darkness before anyone celebrates the harvest. David was chosen while still tending sheep, long before anyone imagined a crown resting upon his head. Hidden preparation has always been part of remarkable stories. Perhaps your own story has been unfolding in hidden places too. Picture a traveler walking alone through a forest after rain. Every leaf glistens with tiny drops of water, reflecting fragments of sunlight. He thinks he is searching for one destination, but suddenly his attention is captured by a single beam of light breaking through the trees. Everything stops. Not because the forest changed. Because his eyes finally noticed what had been there all along. That is the feeling this story invites you to imagine. Your soulmate, in this fictional narrative, had spent so much time searching for answers outside themselves that they overlooked the quiet miracle standing within reach. Then, without warning, they saw something in you that words could barely contain. It wasn't merely kindness. It wasn't only compassion. It wasn't simply beauty. It was peace. The kind of peace that survives storms. The kind of peace that cannot be purchased. The kind that reminds weary hearts there is still goodness left in the world. And when they recognized it, something inside them lost control. Not through fear. Not through chaos. But through overwhelming recognition. Sometimes recognition feels stronger than excitement. Sometimes truth arrives like a wave that knocks every carefully built wall to the ground. Imagine standing beside a river at sunset. The current appears gentle until you realize its strength beneath the surface. In the same way, your quiet influence has been flowing through places you cannot see. People remember how they felt around you even when they forget entire conversations. Have you ever left a room wondering whether your presence mattered? This story whispers that perhaps it mattered far more than you imagined. There are hearts carrying invisible burdens. Family disappointments. Dreams delayed. Financial uncertainty. Sleepless nights. Questions with no immediate answers. Many people learn to smile while quietly carrying these invisible weights. Yet every now and then they encounter someone whose presence reminds them they are not completely alone. That reminder changes everything. In this imagined journey, your soulmate had become skilled at hiding emotions. They convinced themselves they could control every feeling. They believed time would silence every unanswered question. Then they looked into your eyes. Not literally because your appearance held magical power, but because something genuine reflected back at them. Honesty. Gentleness. Hope. The walls they had spent years constructing suddenly seemed unnecessary. And for the first time, their carefully controlled heart stumbled. The Book of Ruth tells a story where ordinary moments quietly carried extraordinary purpose. Fields of grain appeared ordinary until they became the place where two destinies gently intersected. Nothing happened through spectacle. Everything unfolded through faithful steps, kindness, and unexpected timing. Great stories often arrive dressed as ordinary days. Perhaps that is why ordinary moments deserve more attention than we usually give them. Think about the mornings when sunlight slowly enters a room before anyone speaks. Think about rain tapping softly against a window while the world rushes outside. Think about stars appearing one by one instead of all at once. Creation itself seems to favor gradual revelation. Why should the deepest movements of the heart be any different? This fictional message is not promising future events. It is inviting you to believe that your unseen qualities matter. Your patience matters. Your resilience matters. Your willingness to forgive matters. The compassion you showed someone who could never repay you. It matters. The prayer whispered through tears. It matters. The decision to remain kind after disappointment. It matters. Nothing offered in genuine love is ever truly wasted. Somewhere beyond visible circumstances, those choices continue echoing farther than you realize. But here is where the story suddenly shifts. Because what your soulmate noticed first was not actually what overwhelmed them most. There was something deeper. Something they almost missed. At first they admired your strength. Then they noticed your gentleness. But finally, they saw the way hope continued shining inside you despite every reason it could have disappeared. That realization unsettled them. Not because you were flawless. Because you kept choosing light even after walking through darkness. That kind of courage cannot be imitated. It grows only through experience. And hearts recognize authenticity long before words explain it. Imagine mountains standing through generations of storms. Wind strikes them. Rain falls endlessly. Snow covers them for entire seasons. Yet when spring arrives, they still stand. Not untouched, but unbroken. Perhaps your own heart resembles those mountains more than you know. There are scars you rarely mention. Disappointments you quietly carry. Dreams that seem delayed. Yet somehow, you continue believing tomorrow may still hold beauty. That quiet persistence became impossible for your soulmate to ignore. And just when they believed they understood everything they had seen, another discovery appeared. One that neither they nor you could have anticipated. That revelation begins in the very next chapter. A single moment changed everything. It happened so quietly that no one else would have noticed. The world continued moving as though nothing extraordinary had taken place, yet inside your soulmate, an invisible battle suddenly erupted. They tried to explain away what they had felt. They convinced themselves it was only admiration, only curiosity, only a passing emotion. But every explanation collapsed beneath the weight of one undeniable truth: they could no longer ignore the light they had seen in you. Picture an evening sky just after the sun disappears beyond the horizon. The colors fade slowly, yet one brilliant star refuses to be hidden. In this fictional story, that star became a symbol of the hope your soulmate unexpectedly discovered. They had spent so much time trying to silence their own heart that they forgot what genuine peace looked like. Then your presence reminded them. That realization unsettled them more than they expected. They began replaying ordinary moments in their mind. A conversation that once seemed simple suddenly carried new meaning. A smile they barely noticed became unforgettable. Even the quiet pauses between words seemed to speak louder than entire speeches. They wondered, how did I overlook something so real for so long? The answer was hidden in timing. Throughout Scripture, important moments often arrived only when hearts were ready to receive them. Joseph endured years of waiting before purpose unfolded. The disciples walked beside Jesus before fully understanding who he was. Revelation frequently follows preparation. In the same way, this fictional story suggests that recognition sometimes comes only after the soul has been shaped by life's hardest seasons. That thought would not leave them. For the first time, they stopped looking at what they wanted from life and started asking what kind of person they were becoming. They realized they had spent years chasing certainty while overlooking authenticity. What drew them toward you was not perfection, it was the quiet strength that remained after disappointment, the kindness that survived hardship, and the hope that continued shining even when no one applauded it. Have you ever met someone who made you want to become a better version of yourself? That was the question echoing through their heart. The more they reflected, the more impossible it became to return to who they had been before. Something had awakened within them, not through dramatic signs, but through the simple realization that genuine love begins with seeing another person for who they truly are. Imagine standing beside a river after days of heavy rain. The surface looks calm, but underneath, the current is stronger than ever. That is how their emotions felt. Outwardly, they appeared composed. Inwardly, everything was shifting. Every memory connected to you carried a new depth. Every unanswered question became impossible to ignore. They weren't losing control because of fear. They were losing control because truth has a way of dissolving every mask we wear. And truth always asks a question. What will you do now? Before this fictional journey continues, take a quiet moment to reflect. If these stories inspire you and encourage your faith, consider subscribing to the channel and sharing this message with someone who may need hope today. Your support helps more people discover uplifting stories that remind them they are never alone. Now the story turns again. Late that night, while the world slept, your soulmate found themselves unable to rest. The silence felt different. Memories surfaced one after another, not as painful reminders, but as pieces of a puzzle finally fitting together. They remembered moments when they almost reached out but hesitated. Moments when pride spoke louder than honesty. Moments when fear disguised itself as wisdom. And suddenly they understood something unexpected. It was never distance that kept them away. It was uncertainty within themselves. The wind outside carried the gentle sound of rustling leaves, as though creation itself whispered that every season eventually changes. In that quiet atmosphere, they realized that waiting had transformed them. The person they once were no longer existed. The walls they built for protection had become barriers against the very connection they longed for. Then another thought entered their heart. What if this opportunity doesn't come again? That question echoed with surprising intensity. They remembered the words from 1 Corinthians 13, that love is patient, kind, and rejoices with truth. Those words suddenly felt personal. Love was no longer just an idea. It became a mirror revealing who they wanted to be. They closed their eyes, and in their imagination they saw a path stretching through a peaceful valley. At first, it seemed empty. But as morning light slowly spread across the landscape, another figure appeared in the distance. The closer that figure came, the clearer everything became. It wasn't the destination that filled them with hope, it was the realization that every difficult step had prepared them to recognize what truly mattered. Yet even as peace began replacing confusion, one final mystery remained. There was something about you they still had not discovered. Something hidden beneath your quiet strength. Something that, once revealed, would challenge everything they believed about themselves and completely reshape the direction of this fictional story. And when that hidden truth finally comes into the light, their next decision will be impossible to take back. The quiet truth was closer than anyone realized. Morning arrived gently, painting the horizon with soft gold as if the sky itself had turned another page in this story. Everything around your soulmate appeared ordinary. Birds sang from distant trees. The breeze carried the scent of fresh rain. People hurried through familiar routines without noticing that one heart had awakened with a completely different perspective. What they had seen in you refused to fade. It followed them into every conversation. Every quiet moment. Every unexpected silence. No matter how hard they tried to distract themselves, one question kept returning. What if the greatest gift I have been searching for has been standing quietly before me all along? That question unsettled them more than they expected. Not because it demanded an immediate answer, but because it exposed something they had hidden for years. Deep inside, they had been afraid of genuine connection. Not because they lacked love. Because real love asks people to be honest. Honest about fears. Honest about mistakes. Honest about hopes they stopped admitting even to themselves. In this fictional journey, your presence became like a clear mirror reflecting not only who they were, but who they could become. Suddenly they remembered a verse from Psalm 139, where the psalmist speaks of being fully known and lovingly understood by God. That thought lingered in their heart. If heaven knows every hidden corner of a person's soul and still offers grace, perhaps they no longer needed to hide behind old defenses. Something began changing. Slowly. Quietly. But undeniably. Imagine standing beside an ancient olive tree that has endured countless seasons. Storms bent its branches. Harsh summers tested its roots. Yet every spring it continued producing fruit. Strength had never come from avoiding hardship. Strength came from remaining rooted through it. Your soulmate realized that the quality they admired most in you was not confidence. It was quiet perseverance. You had continued walking through difficult seasons without allowing bitterness to define your spirit. That realization stirred both admiration and humility. They asked themselves, could I become someone worthy of protecting a heart like that? For the first time, they stopped imagining what they wanted to receive and began thinking about what they wanted to give. That shift changed everything. Because authentic love is less about possession and more about becoming a safe place for another person's heart. As the day unfolded, unexpected reminders seemed to appear everywhere. A familiar song drifted from a nearby cafe. A child laughed freely in a park. Sunlight reflected across the surface of a river with such brilliance that they paused without understanding why. Ordinary moments suddenly carried extraordinary meaning. It reminded them of Elijah discovering God's presence not in the wind, not in the earthquake, not in the fire, but in a gentle whisper. Sometimes the deepest revelations arrive without noise. They simply settle into the heart until everything looks different. Then something unexpected happened. While sorting through old belongings, they found a small object connected to a forgotten season of life. It wasn't valuable. It wasn't impressive. Yet holding it reopened memories they thought had disappeared forever. Memories of missed opportunities. Conversations left unfinished. Feelings never expressed. For a brief moment, regret tried to take control. But instead of remaining trapped there, they understood something remarkable. The past could teach them. It no longer had to define them. Hope quietly replaced regret. They stepped outside as evening approached. The sky was filled with countless stars, each one shining without competing against the others. Looking upward, they realized that every star becomes visible only after darkness arrives. Perhaps difficult seasons had not hidden purpose. Perhaps they had revealed it. That thought filled them with unexpected peace. Still, one mystery remained unsolved. They could clearly see the goodness in you. They could recognize the strength in you. They could feel the peace surrounding your spirit. But there was one part of your story they had never understood. A hidden chapter. A quiet struggle. A sacrifice you made that almost no one noticed. And in this fictional story, when that hidden chapter is finally revealed, your soulmate will realize that everything they believed about your journey was only the beginning. The next revelation will uncover why your quiet strength carries a deeper meaning than anyone ever imagined, and once that truth comes to light, neither of your hearts will see the future the same way again. Not every battle leaves visible scars. Some of the deepest victories are hidden beneath quiet smiles, ordinary conversations, and moments when no one realizes how much courage it took simply to keep moving forward. In this fictional story, your soulmate was about to discover that the strength they admired in you had been forged through unseen seasons of perseverance. It began with a conversation they never expected to have. An elderly stranger sat alone on a weathered bench overlooking a peaceful lake. The water reflected the evening sky like polished glass, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of pine through the air. Your soulmate almost walked past without stopping, but something urged them to pause. The stranger smiled warmly. "You know," the stranger said softly, "the strongest people are rarely the loudest." Those simple words settled deep within their heart. For reasons they could not explain, they immediately thought of you. They remembered your patience, your quiet kindness, the way you never demanded attention, yet somehow left a lasting impression wherever you went. And suddenly they realized they had mistaken gentleness for weakness. In truth, it had always been extraordinary strength. That realization changed the way they remembered every encounter. The moments they once considered ordinary now felt priceless. Every encouraging word you had spoken, every act of compassion, every time you chose understanding instead of anger, every time you remained hopeful when giving up would have seemed easier. They understood something they had never seen before. Your greatest quality was not what you accomplished. It was who you remained while walking through difficult seasons. The stranger looked toward the setting sun and quietly added, "Light does not argue with darkness. It simply shines." Those words echoed through your soulmate's thoughts long after the conversation ended. They remembered the teaching of Jesus in Matthew 5, where his followers are encouraged to let their light shine before others, not to seek praise, but so that goodness may point people toward hope. In this fictional story, that verse became deeply personal. You had never tried to become someone's inspiration. Yet your quiet faithfulness had become exactly that. As night settled across the landscape, clouds slowly drifted apart, revealing countless stars above the mountains. Your soulmate stood in silence, overwhelmed by an unexpected realization. Perhaps the reason they could not stop thinking about you had nothing to do with coincidence. Perhaps your life had reminded them that hope still existed. Not the loud, temporary excitement the world often celebrates, but the steady hope that remains even after disappointment. The kind that survives unanswered questions. The kind that chooses forgiveness. The kind that believes tomorrow can still hold beauty. For the first time, they stopped asking whether they deserved to meet someone like you. Instead, they began asking a far more important question. Am I becoming the kind of person who reflects that same light? That question marked a turning point. It no longer felt like a story about finding love. It became a story about transformation. Like Saul becoming Paul after a life-changing encounter, they realized that genuine change always begins within before it becomes visible on the outside. Every step home that evening felt different. The familiar streets somehow looked new. The wind carried peace instead of uncertainty. The silence no longer felt empty. It felt full of expectation. Before this fictional journey continues, if these stories encourage your heart and remind you to hold on to hope, consider subscribing to the channel and sharing this video with someone who may need a little light today. Your support helps these uplifting stories reach more people searching for encouragement. Yet the greatest surprise was still waiting. When your soulmate finally returned home, they noticed something resting quietly where they least expected it. Not a grand sign. Not an extraordinary miracle. Just a small handwritten note tucked inside an old book they had not opened in years. They were certain it had never been there before. With trembling hands, they unfolded the paper. Only one sentence was written across it. The answers you seek begin where fear ends. They stared at those words in complete silence. No signature. No explanation. Only that single mysterious sentence. And somehow, it felt as though an entirely new chapter had just begun. What they would uncover next would reveal a forgotten piece of your story that neither of you had ever imagined, and once that hidden truth came into the light, every question they had carried would lead to one astonishing discovery.